Welcome, everyone, to our Sheets session. 30 tips and tricks, thank you, 30 tips and tricks to help you uncover data insights. I'm Dan Gundrum, a product manager on Sheets.
I'm Andy Rudd, also a product manager on Sheets.
All right, and with that, let's kick into it. Let's help you analyze your data. I've seen the slides. Yeah, awesome, perfect. This is the session. So as you're analyzing some of the data, maybe you're feeling a little overwhelmed, right? There's literally mountains of data out there that's generated every day, petabytes and petabytes of it. And you need the right tools. There's a lot of information to get through. You need the right tools to find those insights. But don't be overwhelmed. That's what we're here for you today to help you with, and that's what Sheets can help too. So we want you to be feeling like this at the end of the talk, right? Jumping up for joy. You have the tools that you need in order to get those insights out of your data. So how are we going to do this? A few different ways. First, we're going to show you a bunch of time-saving tips to help you analyze your data, things that you just need to know about Sheets. Secondly, we are going to tell you about some of the new things that we launched within the last year. These are really cool things that we hope you'll enjoy. And third, and one of my personal favorites, we're going to be talking about our upcoming roadmap a bit, sneak peek things that we haven't discussed before today. So you'll get a sneak peek into that. All right, so we wanted to also frame and structure this talk around a workflow in terms of doing analytics. It's a series of steps to help you prepare and analyze your data. So one of the first steps to do that is to collect the information. It comes in a variety of different sources and ways, so you want to bring it into Sheets in order to start analyzing it. After that, you need to prepare it. You need to get it in the right format, clean it up a little bit, because then you're going to be doing some analysis on it, writing those formulas, doing the pivot tables, filtering, sorting, that kind of thing. And then you need to make it understandable. You need to help people get some insight out of that data, so you want to visualize it and get it in a format that everyone understands. So that's kind of the analytical structure, and then all of this is built on, and this is where G Suite really shines, is collaboration in the cloud. So we're going to run through those 5 sections in this talk, and that's kind of how we're going to structure the talk today. So with that, let's jump into collecting data. One of the best ways to actually collect data is by asking people. You can actually ask people using Google Forms. It's a great tool that integrates directly with Sheets so that you're able to ask questions, get data in a structured format, and immediately comes into a spreadsheet so you can start analyzing and understanding the data. We also know that data comes in a variety of different formats. For example, images and cells. So this is one of the new features I was talking about. We actually just launched this a couple of weeks ago, brand new feature. It allows you to put images directly inside of cells. So as you filter and sort content, the images stay associated with it. It's great for a bunch of different use cases like the ones listed on the screen. We also know that businesses and enterprise uses a bunch of different applications to store your data. For example, you might be using SAP to store your data. So we're proudly worked with SAP to provide an export to Sheets option. So if you're using SAP, just a couple of clicks from SAP to get your data inside of Sheets to start collaborating and analyzing it. If you're interested in learning more about that integration, there's a link on the screen that you can check out. It tells you the details on the SAP partnership. If you are managing customer relationships as well, maybe you're using Salesforce. So we've also partnered with Salesforce to provide an add-on that allows you to pull data from Salesforce, bring it into Sheets. You can then, again, collaborate, analyze the data, and then actually put the data back into Salesforce as well. And this is available already today. It's in an add-on, so you can go to add-ons menu in Sheets, search for this, download it. It was released about a year ago, but this is one of the things we've been updating. We've been making some updates to it based on requests that many of you have given us. You can now refresh the data on various intervals. You can either manually trigger a refresh, or you can even set timers to refresh the data at a scheduled time. Many of you are probably also using GCP, so we have you covered there as well. Last year, we previewed this feature, which was a data connector for BigQuery, and earlier this year, we launched it live to everyone. And what this allows you to do is write some SQL in Sheets, pull data from BigQuery directly into spreadsheets, and then start analyzing it and understanding it. And you never have to leave the comfort of your spreadsheet in order to do this. So I mentioned a few sneak peek features. one of the things in our upcoming roadmap. So I'm pleased to talk about today as well, on-premise data connectors. So we are taking what you had with BigQuery, but opening it up to data that sits at your company as well, on-premise. So this is currently in very early alpha stages, so I have an invitation for all of you as well. If you would like to join our alpha program, there is a link on the screen there. We're actively supporting the databases that are listed on the screen, and of course, with your feedback, we will make it better and add more. So without even talking about it, I'll actually show you a demo. It's actually better to see this live in action, so why don't we actually switch over to the other computer, and you'll see what I'm talking about with on-premise data connectors. So to access data connectors, you go to the data menu. There's a data connectors option. And on-premise is under this managed data sources option. We have Oracle already set up, so let's choose that. And then you are presented with some, a SQL editor. We'll just paste some stuff in. I've written this before. If you're familiar with SQL, it's a pretty basic query. You're pulling in some first name, last name, and some order information. You're able to preview the results to make sure everything looks good. This is good. And then you can insert those results. And again, this is now from my on-premise Oracle database running at Google somewhere. And now I have pulled it into Sheets and can start analyzing and collaborating with it on the cloud. So yes, I had to be familiar with SQL in order to do this, but what if you're not super familiar with SQL as well? What if you wanted to enable people at your company to use this who aren't as familiar? So I have another tab here where I started setting up a configuration sheet. It's a very simple, just a drop down with a list of first names of people at my company. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back and modify this SQL query, so I can go and edit the query here. What we're going to do is we're going to add a parameter to this. So we're just going to add something to the first name. So we're going to add this parameter. It's basically like a variable that can point to a cell. So I'm going to go back to that configuration and say that this cell controls that part of the query. I'm going to add that in there. So that's the new SQL query. I'll update the results. And as you see, now I'm only seeing the net's information. So now if you share this, and let's say someone else comes in. Let's say Christopher comes in. Christopher doesn't actually even need to know any SQL. He can just come in and go back to this data sheet, press refresh, and then he sees his information. So it's linked to that data, and Christopher didn't actually have to modify the SQL or do anything. He's just able to choose from a drop-down, press refresh, and it's just like that. Again, this is all running from on-premise data with this. All right, so that is on-premise data connectors. We can switch back to the slides as well now. So if you are interested in that, and we'll have links again if you didn't get a screenshot of it or a picture towards the end of the talk. To wrap up this section on connecting data, I also wanted to talk about what you might have seen earlier in the keynote, which is the connected sheet. So what the connected sheet is it's kind of taking what you actually just saw and taking it to the next level. Remember I had to write SQL in order to get that information in? With the connected sheet, no more SQL. You can just point to your data set and you bring in, and you're able to connect to the data. And as you saw, I had to bring in the data when I was doing the other data connectors. With the connected sheet, you're not actually bringing in the data, we're linking to the data. So literally, we have eliminated Sheets size limitations. You can now analyze billions of rows of data inside of Sheets. So we are, cool, some excitement. We are entering a beta program in a few months. If you are interested in this, you have data in BigQuery that you'd love your company to start analyzing inside of Sheets, really just bringing it to the rest of the people at your company. There's a URL there that you can learn more about and sign up. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to Andy, who will talk about the next step in the process.
Awesome. Thank you, Dan. So Dan has talked us through a lot of exciting ways that we can bring data into Sheets. But we know that depending on how that connection was created, where that data came from, it's not always exactly ready for the next step, right? So we want to focus here on how do you get data prepared, formatted, cleaned up, standardized so that you can move on to analysis. So the first important feature is text to columns. We know that there are certain file formats that you might bring into Sheets that have different delimiters in them, and they don't always snap exactly in the way you would want them to into columns. We have a couple ways we handle this for you. The first is through a text-to-column feature in the data menu. You can also achieve a similar outcome with the split function. So pass through data, indicate what your delimiter is, and then have it broken out into columns. And then we also have a nice little import dialog that happens when you bring file formats into Sheets. Here we see a fixed width formatted file being brought into Sheets, the separator being indicated, and then we have some usable data on the right for us. We're excited to talk about 2 data prep features that we're really excited to bring into Sheets. The first is trim whitespace. So there's some funny stuff that always happens with formatting, right? Sometimes you have leading or trailing white spaces on your data. It mucks up your standardization. With this feature, we allow you to grab a range of data, simply trim the white space on it, and then you should be good to go. Another one that we hope you guys are as excited about as we are is the ability to remove duplicates. So we know that people have been asking for this one in particular for a very long time. And we're excited now to allow you to, as you would expect, select a range of data, indicate some removal criteria, and then execute the removal to only see unique results. Awesome. Woo! Woo-hoo. Great. So once you've brought some structure to your data, we know that we need to help you organize it a little bit better. Grouping rows and columns is a really magical way to do this for yourself. So let's say here we have a beautiful looking spreadsheet, right? We might want to group like things together so that when it's appropriate, we can organize, expand, and collapse subsections of our data. We think this makes, particularly when you're working with a lot of data, it a little bit easier to navigate through a spreadsheet. Checkboxes and cells are something that we love, a really magical way, a really magical way to represent binary values in a more interactive fashion, right? So let's say you have a column that represents true or false values, maybe yes or no. Here we see whether a task has been complete or not. We can represent those with a checkbox and then have any user interactively toggle that to change the value of the underlying data. And magically, checkboxes can be passed to many of the spreadsheet capabilities that you would hope that they would be able to. So these work with functions, with conditional formatting, and with filters as well. And while we're talking about formatting, we want to mention everyone's favorite, macros. So macros, we think, are an incredible time saver, right? And particularly when you need to automate repetitive work. Often we see folks have spreadsheets with many, many sheets in them, each of which have a similar data structure. Rather than painfully going through and formatting each one in the same way, you can record those formatting actions once with a macro and then play that back on different sheets within your spreadsheet. This not only saves you time, it also prevents manual errors you might have made in replicating that process on different sheets. So let's see some of these prep items in action. We're going to jump to a scenario here. It looks like I'm in my inbox. I see a message from Dan. He knows I'm the cleanup guy, so I kind of think I know what this task is going to be, right? It looks like he's gotten some export of opportunities from another one of our colleagues. He wants me to throw them into Sheets and then clean them up. It also looks like there's another export that will be coming to us in a little bit, so we'll wait with bated breath to see what that looks like. So I'm going to go ahead and add this first drop into my drive. And I'll jump over to a sheet I prepared to represent these opportunities. So let's bring in that file. I'm going to import. I see that opportunities tab separated file in my drive, so I'll select it. So here, we just want to replace the current sheet of our spreadsheet. We can indicate the separator type if we want to, but let's see what Sheets does for us out of the gate. OK. So I've got some data in. Immediately, I'm seeing some things that aren't as usable as I would want them to be. Notably, this column B says opportunity name, and it's showing me a company and then some number of widgets that are up for grab with that opportunity. So I'd really like to represent those values separately. So let's split them out into 2 columns. First here, I'm going to use the split function to do that. So I'll point to that data. I'll indicate what the delimiter is. I'll hit return, and then awesome. So I see those broken out. I'll go ahead and apply that down. And now I have a standalone opportunity and then a number of widgets that are up for grabs. I'm going to go ahead and copy those results and paste them over themselves as values. So that just gets rid of the underlying formula for us. So we know, we think there's something goofy happening here, right? So we know because we split on that hyphen, we see there's a space before and a space immediately after. That's some white space we're going to want to get rid of. So with that data selected, I'm going to go into the data menu and use that trim white space feature we talked about. OK, great. So we had 2 columns here. It looks like it's evaluated 30 rows and removed white space from every single cell in that selection. So now we're getting much closer. This feels almost like we're in good shape to use what we've got here. But because I have this header called widgets, I don't really need that label on every single cell, right? So I'm going to select those values. And this time, I'm going to use the split text to columns option within the data menu. I'll indicate that our separator here should be a space. And boom, I'm good to go. I'm going to go ahead and delete that widgets column since we no longer need it. All right, we're getting closer. I know sometimes in the past when I've gotten these exports from Dan, there are duplicates in them. We don't want duplicates here. We want to look at only unique sales opportunities that we have. So let's show off that remove duplicates feature we talked about. Again, I'm entering the data menu. I'm going to remove duplicates. I'll leave all of these columns selected. I really want to find exact matches, right? So let's execute that removal. Looks like we found 1 row, and now we are confident that we have 30 unique rows that we're working with. Great. So let's imagine here that I've talked to Dan offline. He's made sure that the next time he does that export, we won't have that weird column splitting issue that we had to do for ourselves this time. Thank you, Dan. Awesome. And there won't be duplicates next time either. Great. So now that we have confidence that our next data dump will look just like this, let's go ahead and do some formatting here, and we'll record a macro so we can speed up the process the next time we do this. So I'm going to go into Tools, and I'll record macro. And watch as I'm doing these actions. You can actually see what I'm doing show up in that recording box that's popped up here. So I like to bold my headers. I like to freeze the first row so that when I scroll, those headers remain at the top with me. With that done, I like to apply some conditional formatting. So or alternating colors, rather. So let's do some alternate color banding on these rows. I picked yellow there. That looks beautiful. Off to a good start. With that done, I can remove the grid lines. OK, so this is looking nice and readable. I love it. Let's move to the data itself. So we no longer needed this column B, right? It's like too much data for us. So let's go ahead and hide that. I see this revenue number in column E. I think that probably wants to be represented as a currency. So I'm going to change that over and decrease the precision. I see a column we have here called close date. I think that probably wants to be a date. Let's see what happens when we change the number formatting. All right, that looks really nice. And then lastly, I see a column here called probability that looks like it probably wants to be a percentage. So I'm going to change that number formatting, decrease the precision again. We've got nice big whole numbers we're working with, and I think we're looking pretty good. So I'm going to save that. Let's just call this macro prepped data so we know we can use it when data is prepped. We could add a shortcut. I'm not going to for now. And we're good to go. So let's jump back over to our inbox and see if Dan has come through with that second batch of opportunities. Of course he has. He's so reliable. Incredible. This time, let's download it just to show you a little bit different flow. So I've downloaded that drop from Dan. Thank you very much. No more duplicates. Dan's the best.
Thank you.
So we'll import here again. This time I'm going to upload and just drag that download into this section. Great. So this time around, I want to insert a new sheet. Get rid of that, and we'll import the data. OK. So I think this looks pretty nice. It looks like Dan did work out that column splitting issue that we talked about. So I think the only step remaining here is to run that macro back against this sheet and see where that gets us. So I just clicked run macro, and I can see all those actions that I performed play back immediately for us. And now we've got an Opportunities 2 tab that we got from Dan, Opportunities 1 tab, and they look the same. We're ready to move on to the heart of finding insights. Woo! Very cool. OK, so our data is beautiful. It's standardized, it's consistent, it's formatted in a way that everyone makes them happy and smile when they look at it, right? So let's move on to analysis, actually finding meaningful insights from the data that we've brought in. Of course, when you start to do analysis, one of the first things you might do is some calculations. Sheets has over 400 functions. Everything from the rites of passage like VLOOKUP, index and match that you're used to, and then some unique functions as well. Whether it is doing some mathematical calculations, we have an average weighted formula that does exactly what it sounds like, a sort in formula that allows you to turn some top number of results from your data set. Whether those formulas are showing some results for you visually in a cell, so a sparkline function that we provide is a really nice, quick way to visualize a value within a cell, or whether it's leveraging Google's unique strengths, right? So the Google Translate function is a really magical way to translate text from one language to another, or pull data quickly from some other external source, which is what we do with the Google Finance function. And when we feel confident about what you're trying to do, we will suggest formulas for you. So we know sometimes that remembering specific names is hard, or knowing exactly the range of data that you want to pass into that function can be tricky. And so when we have high confidence, we'll recommend those actions for you. We found that with this acceleration, these suggestions can make formula entry up to 5 times faster than they would be otherwise. And if you are a real sucker for time savings, sometimes we'll guess for you before you've typed in anything. So what we see happening here, the user's entered a cell, they've hit the equals sign, and we're already kind of guessing what they might want to do. So here, I'm below a range of data. I might want to find the average or the sum. That's a really magical way that we speed up your analysis. I want to shift focus here to talk about some of the different filtering mechanisms that we provide in Sheets. We have a couple different ways of doing this, and they're really powerful under different circumstances. So the first is with basic filters. We think these are really powerful when you are working collaboratively with a peer and a spreadsheet at the same time. When you apply a basic filter, that applies to every viewer of the spreadsheet. When you filter, when you sort, that view persists and will be what any future visitor to the spreadsheet sees when they enter. Really great if there's some splice that everyone at your company cares about, or everyone that's going to enter that spreadsheet cares about, and you can kind of persist that view for them. Let's imagine, however, you're working in parallel with someone. Maybe you and your analyst colleague have different sort of insights you're trying to uncover at the same time, and you don't want to disrupt each other. Filter views are our mechanism for allowing this sort of parallelized collaboration. So with a filter view, you have this kind of stealth mode, right? And you can have the confidence that when you're applying filters and sorts, it's only affecting you as the viewer. You can also save these filter views. So maybe there are different splices of your data that will be powerful in the future. You can name them to represent why that's a meaningful filter. And you can share them. So filter views have unique URLs that can be shared with your colleagues. A really quick way to just show them one particularly interesting slice that you might have done. And we are excited to give you a sneak peek of a new filtering paradigm. So slicers are a new filter type that we're bringing into Sheets that are really powerful, we think, for bringing a new level of interactivity. These are great when maybe you've made a report or a dashboard and you want to give your colleagues some kind of remote control access to the analysis that they might want to do for themselves, right? So again, slicers only affect you as the viewer. Another colleague could come into that spreadsheet and work with the slicer independently. And they modify the underlying data for objects in Sheets. So here we see someone using a slicer on charts and pivot tables maybe, and getting particular views of that data. We'll show you this in action in a couple minutes. So that was a lot. Let's recap that. 3 different kind of filtering paradigms, right? Filters are really powerful working collaboratively when you want all viewers to see filters that have been applied. Filter views are great when you don't want to disrupt what others are up to in your sheet. They're also, I didn't mention this before, really powerful when you only have view access. So you're not an editor of a sheet, but you've got some questions about it anyways. You can use a filter view with view-only access. And then slicers, which we gave you a sneak peek of, are really great next level of interactivity for your reports and your dashboards. And everyone's favorite, pivot tables. So we know that pivot tables are a crucial tool for any spreadsheet analyst when you're doing some initial investigation to aggregate your underlying raw data. So these can be great when you're first attempting to zero in on some interesting trends. It can be a really powerful way also to represent your findings visually if you want to show some buckets of your underlying data. And they've come a really, really long way in Sheets. We're proud of some of the interactive mechanisms that we give you around drilling down to see the values that underlie a given bucket, some calculations that you can do in the pivot table builder itself. So we've done some incredible analysis. Let's start to bring these things to life with visualizations.
Thank you, Andy. So we have taken you through 3 steps of the journey so far. We've brought the data in, Andy showed you how to prepare it, and we've analyzed a bunch of it. So now we need to help people understand this data. We've done a lot of great analysis. We need to bring it to life, help them find those key insights. One of the best ways you can do this is through a simple pop of color. You can use conditional formatting in Sheets with using a variety of different conditional formatting methods to really help the data shine and stand out. Where does your eye get drawn in this data set? Probably to those red cells, right? Like the things that are closer to 0. You probably should take a look at those cells, right? So conditional formatting and gradient conditional formatting in this example helps you with that. Another way to visualize data is through charts. Sheets has dozens of chart types. We have a bunch of them listed here on the screen. We've also been actively working on improving charts. One of the features that we're happy to have launched within the last year was the ability to highlight a part of the chart. So this really draws your attention to that green bar, doesn't it, right? Your eye almost goes immediately to that section. You're telling your audience, hey, look here, right? And so you're able to highlight particular points or bars in a chart. But we're not stopping there. We're also improving charts as well. One of the top things that we hear from you is you want to interact with charts in a more natural, native way. Just want to click on a point and drag it, or click and delete. So we're going to be updating charts to allow you to do that more as well. And we're introducing a new type of chart, scorecard charts. So this is a great chart type if you really want to emphasize a key point or a KPI, a key performance indicator in your data set. This chart type allows you to do that. But maybe you don't know, maybe you're not an expert user and you don't know how to create charts yourself, or maybe you're just getting started. That's where Explore in Sheets can help you as well. If you're not super familiar with it, Explore is kind of like an assistant that's by your side helping you with Sheets. You can ask it questions in English, just like you would as a coworker or anyone else. And even if you don't ask, it'll suggest you things. Here's a pivot table to add to your dashboard or report or spreadsheet. Here's a chart that looks interesting, that might be relevant for your data. So basically what this leads to as well is, like, we've done all this analysis, right? You have all of this data. You want to start interacting with it, to drill in and really understand it. You can bring all these features together through reports in Sheets. Lots of sneak peek features in our roadmap that are going to be launched within the next few months to come together to help you build really great reports like this one, showing some Air Asia flight information. Andy was talking about slicers earlier. I just mentioned scorecard charts. There's a bunch of other features that are going to be launching to really help you create these beautiful reports directly in Sheets. But without talk, let's show you it, right? Like it's best to see this live in action. So. We're jumping to the demo here. This is the same spreadsheet I was showing before with the conditional formatting. Let's say you are analyzing some inventory in one of your stores and or a region of stores, and you want to create a report. So I have this other tab here where I started creating one. Just to save us some time, I started adding a few items. So let's actually take a look at, I was mentioning Explore can help provide some instant insights into the data. So we'll take a look at that. It's in the bottom right corner, so I can see this Explore button down here. You'll notice that there's actually no data. There's no raw data on this sheet, so when I open up Explore, it's going to be blank for a second, but what I can do is actually point it to the data or any other sheet in the spreadsheet and start seeing immediate results over it. So now I can immediately get some insights, like I can start asking questions. I see a pivot table that's suggested to me. I see a bunch of charts that I'm automatically able to start interacting with. Let's say I like this one. I think that looks interesting. It's a list of our inventory in a bunch of different regions. So let's say I wanted to insert that. I can just scroll to an open space and literally just drag and drop that in to the spreadsheet. And now I have that chart inserted into my spreadsheet. I didn't have to even know how to create it or do anything like that, right? She's just suggested that. Let's say I'm looking for something in particular as well. I can ask Sheets a question, just like I would almost a person. So let's say I was looking for something, let's say like the total quantity that I need to order in my stores, because quantity to order is something that I'm tracking. And I want to see that broken down by location. So how much inventory do I need to see in each location? And there you go. The result was instantly returned to me. And actually, if you see, this is a pivot table. And I actually didn't even need to know what a pivot table was in order to insert this. All I had to know was, I just want to see inventory by location and how much I need to order, right? So I don't have to be even a spreadsheet expert to now be able to interact with and use pivot tables. So let's insert this into the spreadsheet. Let's say I want this. This is actually a new part of the flow as well. You can choose where you want to put the pivot table. So that's great because I want it on this sheet. I don't want it on a new sheet. Let's choose right there. And let's insert that pivot table. So great. There we go. Now the pivot table is on my report. It's starting to look pretty good. I notice this chart is a little big, kind of hanging off the side there. So let me actually make it a little smaller. One of the things I can do is use some of the new features. See that red line that's kind of appearing off to the left side? That's a guide to tell me that it's perfectly aligned with the other chart. And when I resize this chart, look at what starts to happen. Let me just scroll up so you can see it a little bit more. See those blue lines that appear as well? That means it's perfectly sized with that other chart as well. So now I know things are looking great. You might be familiar with some of these features in slides already. We're bringing those to Sheets as well. Just really making sure that everything looks great together. Andy mentioned slicers before. Here's one example slicer that you could use. Let's actually show you how to insert another one. So this is under the data menu. Slicers, kind of in this filter section. So we can choose that slicer. And let's, again, align it, make sure it looks good. That's great. And then all you have to do is choose. So it's kind of a filter, right? So we have to choose a column of data to filter on. So we can go over here. Let's choose location as our filter option. Great. So that's it. That's the ease of setting up a slicer on your dashboard. This is starting to look really good. Before I share it with Andy, I want to make sure that this matches my company's brand. But I don't want to spend, there's so many things on here. I don't want to spend so much time doing this. I can use the new themes feature to style this really quickly. I can choose from a variety of different options. And as you see, everything updates with one click as I choose the different theme options. And I can even customize this theme. Like I said, it needs to match my company's brand. Our company color, let's say our primary color is red. You can quickly do that with one click. And the charts and even the pivot table has this little hint of red added to it. So everything's starting to look great. I can send this to Andy now, and we can start collaborating on this report. So let's say we do that. I want to see information because I'm in control of the supplies in the European region. So I can use this slicer and say, I only want to see data for Spain and Portugal, countries in Europe. So when I do that, the dashboard updates. You saw some of the bars change, this total in the scorecard chart updated. Now, what Andy was talking about earlier, let's say Andy's now working on the same spreadsheet at the same time, right, and messing with this data. Let's say he was in control of countries in Asia. So he wants to see this information. If he does that and modifies the slicers at the same time while I'm viewing this, my view will stay the same. I'm still able to look at what I want to see in this dashboard or report, and Andy can also collaborate and use the slicers at the exact same time, and we're not impacting each other. We can still look at what we want to look at and do our own analysis. This is really powerful because we're collaborating on the same file at the same time, the same underlying data, but we can look at what we're interested in looking at without impacting each other. So that is reports, and we'll switch back to the presentation. Thank you. Thank you. So we have taken you through a lot of the steps of this workflow. We've shown you collecting information, preparing it, analyzing, visualizing it. But I did hint at one thing earlier, and you might be wondering, whatever happened to that connected sheet, right? I didn't show you a demo of that. So we've gone through all of these steps, and what we've seen is we've done, all of this data so far has been in Sheets. But what if I start analyzing and doing this stuff with linked data in BigQuery? Millions and millions, even billions of rows of data. So I'm going to switch back to a demo now again and actually show you a lot of this with the new feature, the Connected Sheets feature. So now let's say we are analyzing grocery store information. You're trying to understand information to make some decisions about your stores. You might have noticed earlier, if you saw when I went to data connectors, there was a new option for the connected sheet here. So let's do that this time. So we're just going to choose from our project list. These are BigQuery projects and databases. We have this groceries table. Let's connect to that. And just in a couple of seconds, we're connected to BigQuery. As you remember that first flow that I showed earlier, I have the data linked here now. I didn't have to write any SQL, right? The data is now linked. And if you see up here, we're connected to 128 million rows of data in Sheets. And there's dozens of columns. This is literally over 1 billion cells of data now that we're working with in Sheets. Let's analyze it, right? And you don't even need to be a power user to start analyzing this information. Let's get a high-level sense of the data. Let's write some formulas. So let's say you want to understand, for example, how many products are sold in your different stores. Whoop. You know, that happens from time to time. It's an early alpha program, so we'll just wait for it. But that's what you could expect in the alpha. Yeah. So let's write a count unique formula, and we will do that. And then when we start typing in, looks like maybe I have to reconnect this data set. So give me 1 second to just do this, because it looks like that crash might have impacted. So I'm just going to delete this sheet here. That crash might have impacted the formulas that I'm writing. So I'll quickly do it, because it's super simple to do this. Again, don't have to do any SQL. I'm just going to reconnect the data set. Let's insert a new sheet. Let's do some other types of analysis. Let's start inserting some pivot tables. And let's say I wanted to look at the different product names by the stores that they're in. So I can do product names by the stores. And let's say I wanted to look at this by the regions that the information is, to understand what products are popular in different types of regions. I can add values to the pivot table. So let's say I want to see the quantity that's bought. I can change this to a percentage and to view it a different way. And you see this apply button. So when I execute this and press apply, it is now basically generating the SQL required to run this against BigQuery and then return me a pivot table. So I didn't actually have to write the SQL. It's getting returned to me. So it is already done. I got the results returned to me. Again, over 100 million cell rows of data. I was mentioning before, good way to visualize the data. This is a little hard to kind of see and understand, right? Like if I want to understand it and visualize it a little bit better, I can add a pop of color. So I can add some conditional formatting over this. Let's do that. Format, conditional formatting. Let's add a gradient so that the large values stand out. Great. So now what are you starting to see? To me, I see in the, for example, southeast region, it looks like a lot of seafood products seem to be pretty interesting, right? Like smoked salmon, this lobster thing, anchovy, right? But actually in the central region, those actually seem to be less popular items. That's interesting. Maybe we want to start stocking up the items, seafood more in the southeast than in central US. And then if I scroll down, right, like apples seem to be much more popular for whatever reason in the central United States. So again, maybe we need to shift some of our supplies over to that region. Let's show you some other ways to analyze your data as well. Let's create a chart over this data set. So we can do that as well. We can put it on a new sheet, make lots of room for it. And let's say you then want to look at this data over time. Let's say you wanted to look at the sales, for example. So you can do that. Let's just type in sales, find that, and we want to see a sum of it. You can actually use this new grouping option as well to say how you want the transaction date grouped by. So let's say we have a hypothesis. We want to see the data grouped by the month. Maybe there's some seasonal effect to our sales in our grocery store. So again, we can just click apply to run this and execute against BigQuery, and we get the results returned to us. So interesting, it actually looks like there is not a seasonal effect. I see February has a little bit of a dip. Maybe that's 28 days in February, a little bit. So let's change this grouping. Maybe there's a weekly cycle. So we can change it to day of the week. Maybe try that out. Execute that. And there we go. So yeah, so I'm starting to see now some different interesting trends in the data, right? It looks like we have a lot more sales on the weekends. People go shopping on the weekends. And then Tuesday, Wednesday, less sales. So now I can start making some business decisions off of this. For example, maybe I should offer some promotions to get people shopping on Tuesdays and Wednesdays. Or maybe I need more staffing or more people in my store to support on the weekends because we have higher traffic driven on those times. So you can really start getting these business insights and data really quickly. And, it is an alpha. It is early stages right now, so you saw it. So maybe, a couple of rough edges. But if you are interested, we'd love to have you join the early stages of this and start using it and analyzing your data over BigQuery, billions of rows of it, directly inside of Sheets. So I think with that, we will hand it back to the presentation. And I'll hand it off to Andy to talk about that last section. So we did that with the Connect Sheet with collaboration.
Awesome. Thank you, Dan. So we've gone through this analytical workflow, right? We've brought data into Sheets, we've prepped it, we've analyzed it, we visualized it. We want to come back to some of what we think the core strengths of the G Suite and Sheets are. Are leading with collaboration, finding collaborative moments for you whenever we can, and then some of the benefits that we have of being a product that's native to the cloud. So let's dig into some of those. The first is that Sheets obviously allows everyone to edit together seamlessly. We've heard from enterprise leaders again and again that this really changes the baseline level of transparency in their organization, and it makes every moment more collaborative, right? Here we see two colleagues working together in a sheet. They're changing values, and one thing that they might do to call attention to each other is comment, right? So we have these rich conversations that we enable in Sheets with threaded conversations. Maybe there's a value that I see, thanks to Dan's conditional formatting, that needs a closer look. I can just type in his username or email address and then say, hey, Dan, what's going on here? Anything that sticks out to you? That's a great way to get feedback immediately in the place where you need it. And one more powerful way, I would suppose, of doing this is with action items, right? So in that same commenting workflow, you can actually assign an action item to one of your colleagues. So let's say I really needed Dan's feedback on something. Maybe I needed his approval. Maybe he's the person responsible for that row or that region, whatever it is. I can assign an action item to Dan, draw his attention to it, and then he can come in at his leisure, mark it resolved when he's given me feedback, and then we can move on. Version history is a really powerful way of tracking the evolution of a document, right? So it's really powerful to see what changes were made to your spreadsheet, who made those changes, and when those changes were made, right? And that's what we're doing with version history. One even more powerful way to track that evolution is with named versions. So with named versions, you can mark different milestones, annotate why they were relevant, give your colleagues some kind of indicator as to what that version represents. Here we see maybe a couple weeks ago, we consolidated around a draft outline, and then more recently, we've come to a final version. It's really great to be able to toggle between those to see the differences that happened between those two milestones. And an even more granular version of that we're excited to give you a sneak peek of is the edit history of a cell. So often, version history is great for looking at big changes in the spreadsheet. Sometimes there's a value that is really, really important, and you need to understand how it's gotten to the place that it currently is. With the edit history, you'll be able to see on a cell level what changes were made by who and when. Awesome. So another sneak peek for you. So let's say we've reached the end of this analytical workflow. Often you'll bring your amazing insights out of Sheets, maybe into docs or slides for a more final, presentable artifact, right? Here we see a document, and we've been making progress here, right? So in 2017, we allowed you to bring charts out of Sheets, place them in a doc or a slide. Last year, we did the same thing with tables. And we're excited to give you this sneak peek of the ability to update all of those things at once, wherever they now live. So here we see an awesome report that's got many, many tables and charts copied over from Sheets. Rather than going to every single one and updating it, you can update them all at once and make sure that they match the underlying data, whatever changes have been made in the sheet where those objects were created. Sometimes you want a little bit more metadata about how the document is moving through your organization, who it's been meaningful for. And the activity dashboard was a feature that we launched last year to give you some of this metadata. As the document owner or editor, it can be really cool to see who's looked at your spreadsheet. You might want to know if Dan, whose input we desperately need, whether he's had the opportunity to make it into a sheet or not. It's a great way to do just that. And no worries, if you don't want to be seen, you can opt out of the activity dashboard as well. So here we see, we provide you a lot of metadata about the viewers. We also provide you metadata about the trend in viewers. So maybe it's cool for you to see when a document went viral within your organization, or when a lot of people came into it to make a decision. And we're excited to have updated the activity dashboard to track a couple different things, right? So the first is common trends. Same thing with viewer trends, but what if you could track the conversation around a document rather than just who's entered it, right? So here we can see when did new comments enter that document? When did replies enter that document? And what was the trend of unresolved comments over time? This can kind of help you see when consensus was reached again, maybe, when a conversation was particularly active about the contents of a document. And we also allow you to get a little bit more granular with the sharing history in the activity dashboard. Sometimes, so these things are great when you want to spread your docs far and wide. Sometimes you want to have a little bit more control. A couple ways we do that. The first is with expiration dates. So you can set expiration dates on your documents, maybe if they're particularly sensitive or you're working with folks that shouldn't have ever-long access to them. You can set expirations of a week, a month, or some arbitrary date in the future. And similarly, you can prevent viewers of a spreadsheet from downloading, printing, or copying the contents. Again, super powerful when data might be particularly sensitive. We announced today the ability to edit Office documents directly within the G Suite editors. So here we can see I might be working with someone that's still outside of G Suite. That's great, that's okay. But I want to still have the added benefits of G Suite collaboration, interactivity, and so I can make changes directly within Sheets here to an Excel file, and then not have to worry about re-uploading, re-downloading the document. It'll convert back to the original file format that it came from. We're really excited I brought that to you guys today. And we know that, particularly with spreadsheets, there's some incredible muscle memory that people have built up over time, right? And so, of course, Sheets has had keyboard shortcuts for a while. Last year, we talked about how we allow you to override some of the browser shortcuts that were in collision with those shortcuts. And we've come a long way, and we're excited to give you a sneak peek that we've matched a lot of our keyboard shortcuts back to other legacy spreadsheet products so people can come in and have the same sort of time saving they're used to with the crazy things that they don't even know what they're doing in their head, right? We've all seen that person. Awesome. And then just to close this out here, so we want to make sure that you can get to your data wherever you are. Security does not have to mean inconvenience, and that's why you can go offline and edit your documents. And then once you come back online, sync any changes that you've made back to that file. Additionally, you should be able to make those changes on whatever device you have at hand, right? So Sheets obviously is a really strong Android and iOS app, and of course, we're always available in the browser where we were born. Okay, so that's been a whirlwind for us at least. I think for you guys too, maybe. Let's do a quick synopsis of where we've been. We talked about how we bring data into Sheets, that collection phase. We talked about how we get it standardized, cleaned up, formatted beautifully. For digging into insights, that's the analysis step. How do we bring that stuff to life with visualizations? And then we brought ourselves home talking about collaborative strengths and being a cloud-native product. We talked about two really, really exciting early access programs today. The first is the on-prem data connectors that Dan did a wonderful demo of. The second also had an incredible demo, the connected sheet. We wanted to give you another opportunity to see those links if you want to potentially be part of that early access. There are a couple awesome other G Suite sessions still happening at Next. A couple opportunities to hear how people are thinking about using the connected sheet. We wanted to give you a sneak peek at those. And guys, we did it. My goodness, we are at the summit. We made it. We can now bring, we hope you can bring some of these tips back to your colleagues and help them reach new heights.